And we are back. This is the start of the 2024-2025 Alabama men's basketball season that's highly anticipated, not only locally, but nationally. This is the Crimson Crossover podcast sponsored by the Field of 68 and J&J Apparel. I am your host, Christian Sykes, joined as always by Charles Branch and Joey Blackwell. How you guys doing today?
Couldn't be better. This is my favorite week of the year because it's my birthday this week, and Alabama basketball typically starts around this time. So it's kind of hard to really top that. Halloween last week, basketball, Thanksgiving is just a wonderful time to be alive right now.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful time. There's a lot of debates that go on in our world right now. One of them is like, when do you start Christmas music? Do you start it before Thanksgiving or after Thanksgiving? I mean, I think you start it now because Christmas is tomorrow with the basketball season starting. And there's a lot of great games out there, and we're very excited about our game as well. But the anticipation that's been building for this season and this team, and it's only been ramped up even more with getting to finally hang a Final Four banner, the two exhibition games. We're ready to see these games count and see these guys get on the floor and play somebody else. Very excited about tomorrow night.
And there's been a saying in the spaces, if you guys have been following along, when you can hang a better banner. And Alabama surely did hang a banner uh, this offseason over the past couple of weeks, as you saw Joey with the replica one, which I'm surprised it's not hung somewhere in the
I
background.
can't decide where to put it. I can't decide where to put it in my home office or my actual office because I want to put it somewhere where I see it every day and bring a smile to my face. So I can't decide. It's still in the plastic. I haven't taken it out yet.
Well, Alabama was able to hang a banner last year. I think we've talked ad nauseum about that throughout the offseason, and comes in to this season with, if you've seen John Rothstein's tweets, maybe, or if you've seen Field of 68 tweets or whatever, they have a Alabama has a Player of the Year candidate, preseason Player of the Year pick for National and SEC Player of the Year, in Mark Sears, and then on top of that, Field of 68 has Alabama ranked number one. John Rothstein has Alabama ranked number one. They're plus 250 odds to win the SEC championship this year. Like, I don't think there's been a time where Alabama basketball has been so hyped coming into the season and have the expectations that they have. But like for me, I think it's realistic. Like some of the expectations are realistic. Um, through the exhibition games that you guys saw, what did you guys see from this team? Obviously, there was a bunch of injuries. A lot, you didn't get to see the full starting lineup. What did you see from this team that kind of gives you hope that those high expectations can be achieved?
Well, I'll kind of repeat what I said on a couple of the spaces, and that's that um, one of the things that these exhibitions really showed me was just how deep we really are. You know, you had two or three starters that are going to be regular starters throughout the season not playing, and they still never missed a beat. I thought the chemistry of the team was really, really solid for it to be this early, um, especially in the Wake Forest game. Even when they were changing guys out, there never really seemed to be a drop off in production that you typically see, depending on, of course, who's on the floor. So overall, I there have been seasons for Alabama basketball where the expectations were extremely high. That's definitely happened before. But like you said, Christian, this year those expectations seem a heck of a lot more achievable and, and realistic compared to years past. So, you know, if the stars align and everything, goes the way that that a lot of people, not just us, but a lot of experts thinks it could go, then it's really truly set to be a special season this year.
Yeah, it's great to have the two games in Alabama, one in Birmingham, one in Huntsville. And watching those games and just listening to some of the commentary, I would hear things as far as like, can't believe somebody did this in an exhibition game or do that next exhibition game. Like, let's give credit to Wake Forest and Memphis. That's going to be two NCAA tournament teams. It's not playing athletes in action or marathon oil or EA Sports, athletes D2 team. Like, these were two quality opponents, and credit to the fans as well that made it, fun experiences and a great environment, that guys were out there ready to play. So I think that was great from a standpoint of learning what we feel like this team could be, that it wasn't just rolling the ball out there and seeing how they do against some, team from Sun Belt, Southern Conference, whatever it may be, that you're playing high quality opponents, teams that are going to push you a little bit. And, I think we got tested in a couple spots. I think there's still things that we obviously got to figure out on the defensive side. And that is also with the caveat, as Joey mentioned, and we've still got some guys that were battling injuries and did not play. I actually look at the Memphis game, and I know there was frustration on how that game was officiated, in an exhibition game to go in 2.5 hours. But we talked a lot about just, our fouling last year and giving a lot of teams free points. I was kind of glad that a game was officiated like that, even though it may have been long, and you don't want to get in a situation where both teams are shooting 48 free throws. But that's something that I think for us to continue to take the next step. Yes, we hope there's growth on the defensive side, and we're expecting growth on the defensive side, but we got to be a team that can play defense without fouling. So being in a situation like that, and now you can go back and you can watch the film of how do we learn how to play defense without fouling? If they're going to call it very tight, how can we play in a situation like that? I think that kind of hurt us in the game at Auburn last year. It's very difficult to make a comeback when you're continuing to give the other team at least a point or 2 points, going to the free throw line. So it's just, that was one thing I wanted to mention that I understand was frustrating. It's an exhibition game, but hopefully that is an early learning moment for this team as it relates to defense that is going to help us when we get in these more physical games against a Purdue, a Houston, a Rutgers, a Tennessee, and Auburn, teams like that we will obviously face throughout the season.
Yeah, and we'll circle back a little bit later on the exhibition games, talk a little bit more in depth on that, just because some people that do listen to these podcasts don't listen to the spaces. But I really want to talk about these opening 2 games. First, we have UNC Asheville, and then second, you have Arkansas State, coached by Brian Hodgson, who used to be an assistant at Alabama. And frankly, they were, a half a basketball away from making the NCAA tournament. That in Arkansas State this past season, where they got to the Sun Belt Championship, they lost, but that was year 1 for Brian, and I feel like that roster is loaded. But let's start out with UNC Asheville. Charles, I think you did a little bit of as much research as you probably could have done on UNC Asheville being the first game of the season.
Yeah, coming out of the Big South Conference, they finished second in the conference last year, lost in their semifinal game, and that was coming off a campaign where they actually did make the NCAA tournament in 2023. They were a 15 seed that bowed out early on in the first round to UCLA. Mike Morrell is their head coach. He's headed into his 7th season. And now, as I was looking at him, I couldn't help but I had to mention this. His first year at UNC Asheville, he went 4-27. And then, as I just mentioned, 2 years ago, he got in the NCAA tournament. They were 22-12 last year, as I mentioned, second in the Big South. Like, really impressive to be able to turn that program around from that first season and continue to build it into something that is going to compete for a Big South championship again. I mean, this is one of those leagues where it's going to be a one big league. Big South is typically one of those early tournaments in March that gets people ready for March Madness. 2 guys that I think, if you're wanting to know who on their team to watch, Josh Banks and Fletcher Abey played at UNC Asheville last year, both averaged double digits in scoring. They're guys that both shot 40% from the 3-point line. They shot it very well from the free throw line. Like, if Fletcher Abey's going to the free throw line, you might as well just go ahead and put the points on the scoreboard, take the ball out, and let's get playing again. They both have to step up and replace Drew Pember for them last year, who was a guy kind of similar to us with Mark Sears. He averaged 20 points. But I look at this game, first game of the year, with our talent. This should be a game that we're very excited to come out. I expect us to really, as the fight song goes, we're going to teach the Bulldogs to behave. I don't expect this to be a close game. I think it's in that blowout territory in the first half. Maybe they kind of hang in it from that 20-point range in the second half as we try different lineups, maybe get a little sloppy with the ball, but I'd really like to see us deliver an early knockout punch where by that second TV timeout, you feel pretty comfortable in what the result's going to be. And it's more sitting back and watching some of these young guys and some of these rotations and learning more about the team than having to worry about fighting against the team to the end just to secure a win.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see one if we get Latrell Wrightsell, Grant Nelson, and Aiden Sherrill, because especially Aiden Sherrill, we haven't seen him at all. I mean, I think tied tip off he was hurt too. Like you don't unless you've been to a practice in the offseason, you haven't really seen him as an Alabama fan. So I'm excited to see him, especially because he's supposed to play a pretty decent role being the backup big behind Cliff. Um, and then on top of that, I'm excited to see LeBaron Filan. I think that he's been the talk of the offseason. I know that Aiden Holloway has been mentioned a lot as far as his shooting and his facilitating, but just seeing those first two exhibition games that where Filan was playing, where I think he got double digits in both games. He had multiple steals. He was really active defensively, and did a really good job facilitating the ball. I'm so excited to kind of see where he kind of fits in and where these guards kind of fit in the rotation behind Mark Sears and Latrell Wrightsell.
Yeah, I mean, with the guards that we have and playing a team like Asheville, that's not going to be one of the bigger teams that we see this year. We've obviously seen the three guard lineup early on in the exhibitions with Sears, Holloway, Philon. Do you take a chance and maybe go with a four guard lineup and put Wrightsell in there and go, put a Grant Nelson, put a Jaron Stevenson. Obviously, you could have Cliff in there in the five as well, but really spread the floor, really get it going with four guys who can bring it up the floor. That's one of those lineups I think would be interesting for us to see is just the diversity we have as far as different matchups and different things that we could do. I think Coach Oates made the comment that you could see Mo Diabate at the five sometimes this year. Now, that would be a really small lineup if Mo's at the five and those four guards. But again, I think that's something that we didn't have that flexibility, of course, last year. We were limited on what we could do with the bigs. Obviously, Grant stepped in and gave us great minutes at the five, and I still expect us to see Grant a lot at the five this year too, when we can go a little bit smaller or go a little bit more quicker. But that is going to be something interesting, as well as the conversation that there's been all year of just how are these minutes going to be distributed. And I expect it to fluctuate from game to game a lot this year too, like it did 2 years ago, where we would have games where Nick Pringle wouldn't even play and Charles Bediako might play 5 or 10 minutes, and that's it. We just went small those nights.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see kind of what that looks like, because there's been a lot of talk about who's going to redshirt, who's not going to play. And I think this team's going to be similar to how it was a couple of years ago with, I believe it was Brandon Miller's year, where we had an 11-man rotation, but on a night-to-night basis, 11 guys didn't play every night. There'd be some nights, depending on matchups, that you would see different guys come in and be a part of that rotation, and then other nights they wouldn't be as big or having as large an impact on the game, just depending on the team that we're playing. And I think that this is what this team's going to be a lot like. You might not see a guy like a Houston Millette or a Mo Diabate, right, every single night play 15 minutes a game. You might see Mo Diabate come in and play 20 minutes one night and then play 5 minutes the next night, just depending on what type of matchup it is or who, quote unquote, has the hot hand, right? So I'm excited to see the rotations. I'm excited to see, hopefully, as healthy of a lineup we're going to see until December when Chris Youngblood comes back from his injury. But I'm just ready to get this thing tipped off. I've been thinking about this for since the Final Four buzzer ended last April. So,
well, and as you mentioned, all those guys have got to be ready for their moment. I mean, Brian Pasek talked about on the broadcast of the Wake Forest game, do we get past Grand Canyon without Mo Diabate? Obviously, the game Jaron Stevenson had against Clemson, Grant's game against North Carolina. Obviously, Mark Sears had plenty of games where he led us. But then I think about 2 years ago as well, where we're playing Mississippi State at home, really struggling. Dom Welch, who we expected more that year, hits 2 3-pointers in the first half, one of them being right before the first half ends to cut that game to about 5 points. Like that was his moment, and he stepped up, and that became a game that we won instead of losing, and would have been a really tough loss at that point. Jaden Bradley had his moments against Houston. Noah Clowney obviously had his moments. So each of these guys, a moment is going to find you this year. It's, are you going to be ready for that moment, and can you take the bull by the horns and help this team win games?
So let's move on quickly to Arkansas State and just talk about that game, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the exhibition games and maybe some expectations that we have on this season. So what do you got for us, Charles, on the Arkansas State game?
You talked about it, a half a basketball away for Arkansas State from making the NCAA tournament. Lost to James Madison in the Sun Belt championship game. James Madison's coach, Mark Byington, now at Vanderbilt with a roster full of point guards, apparently. We'll see how that works out for them. But not only, is Coach Hodgson a good basketball coach, but he's also got a team that's pretty similar to last year's team. Taryn Todd, Darian Ford, DeAndre Dominguez, Isaiah Nelson, Avery Felts were 5 guys that got a lot of minutes for them last year, and all of them are returning for Arkansas State. Then he goes into the portal, and from the SEC, he gets Joseph Pinion from Arkansas. He gets Rashad Marshall from Ole Miss, and then within his conference, he goes and gets all second team player Kobe Julian from Louisiana, who averaged 17 points a game. It's not just that he's got a good roster, he's actually got some depth as well with just those 8 guys, and there's probably some other guys on his team that have grown in the offseason as well, and he can rely on. Is it a team that I'm concerned about? No, I think it's a team that could play with us for the first half. Last year, we pretty much, game was over by the 10-minute mark. We ended up winning 89-65. We were very balanced that night. Muhammad Wagi had 12 points for us. Jaron Stevenson had 13. Mark Sears only had 13. I kind of expect Arkansas State, again, to kind of push us in the first half. But as the game goes on, I would expect us to extend a lead and comfortably win that game. Since it is election season, I guess I'll just say that Arkansas State was voted to win the Sun Belt this year. So this is a team that we could also see, and not us. They're not going to match us up against Arkansas State in the first round of the NCAA tournament, but a team that's going to definitely be in conversation when people are looking for giant killers and sleepers. I would think Arkansas State's going to be a team that's talked a lot about once the NCAA tournament approaches, especially if they win the Sun Belt and have an opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I had to bring in the election into the conversation. Charles, what are your thoughts on Arkansas State?
I just gave you mine.
Or not Charles, Joey. I'm sorry. Sorry, you got me all mixed up with this election stuff.
That's okay. I've been really quiet over here because these are the games that I don't really necessarily know a lot about. I echo what Charles said about Rashad Marshall coming there. I think he's going to be a big factor for them. As well as Kobe Julian. So not really much more to say there. I think those guys are going to be, immediate impact guys for them. We see kind of a similarity with Hodgson, Arkansas State, as Oates had when he first came to Alabama, in that he kind of came out of nowhere and then had to kind of retool the roster. And then over the course, I think he's working at a faster pace than Oates is as far as finally having that depth, because this is only his second year, but he does have that depth now that he was missing last year, and that's what's going to get them deeper in games. They have a pretty tough schedule this year. I was just kind of going through it. It's not a fun schedule for somebody in their tier, but it will be a good one. I noticed they play UAB at Birmingham, so that'll be a fun one. I might try to go to that one. But overall, just this is a good team. They were effective last year, like you said, half a basketball away from making the tournament, and that's a huge turnaround for this program. And so, I think Alabama's going to handle it pretty well. But that being said, it's always fun to have Hodgson back, and it was a really fun game to watch last year. So it'll be a really good way to kind of just help tee off the season this week.
I'm really glad that this game is the second game on the schedule and not a game buried in December around Christmas or New Year's Eve. This is a game that you have to be focused. Even with our talent, you can't just roll the ball out there and go play. You have to know your matchups. This Hodgson's team last year, I think he had 5 or 6 guys that averaged double digits in scoring. So you got to know your switches, you got to know your coverages on defense. Like you've got to be locked into the game plan. And obviously we've got a team that's, as Joey mentioned, there was good chemistry in the Wake Forest game, but we're also now adding pieces that did not get to play in those exhibitions. So being on the same page, I think, is going to be very crucial in a game like this. And I think it's something that we're very capable of doing, but it will be interesting to see, that cohesiveness being tested early on in a game like this.
Well, while you're happy that it's happening at this time of the year, I'm equally as happy that this is the game before the McNeese State game. If we had two, less stout teams before McNeese State, I could see us kind of getting blindsided. But having that, it's kind of like we talked about last podcast or the scheduled podcast, having that slow progression moving up. You have that step of Arkansas State up from UNC Asheville. And who knows, against Arkansas State, I think, like we said, I think Bama will pull away in the second half, but that doesn't mean Arkansas State can't come out and punch you in the mouth in the first half for the first 5-6 minutes. So having that little wake-up call will do a good thing, because McNeese State is very capable of doing that exact same thing. So being able to have that opportunity to, play against a stronger opponent heading into, I won't call McNeese State a trap game, but it could potentially be one. I don't think we'll lose that early, but who knows? But I like that. I like it being this early in the season for different reasons because of that step up.
Well, and Arkansas State's a team that is built to upset teams. They're very similar to Alabama in the sense that Brian Hodgson wants to play the exact same way Nate Oates is playing, right? Does Arkansas State have the talent that Alabama does? No. I mean, it'd be very difficult for Brian Hodgson, especially in his second year, to have that type of talent, especially at Arkansas State. But that doesn't mean that Brian Hodgson isn't going to bring in guys that can shoot the ball, that can stretch the floor, that are going to put pressure on a team that is hopefully coming off of a easy win from UNC Asheville, that it could potentially, like we said, as far as a trap game, could be looking forward to McNeese State. Do I think that happens? I think it's unlikely, but it's definitely possible that, like we said, Arkansas State could come out, maybe hits 5 or 6 threes in the first 8 minutes first 6 minutes of the game, right? And then all of a sudden you're looking up at the scoreboard and Alabama's down 7-8 points early on, and they're having to kind of try to respond. You saw in the Memphis game, if Brian Hodgson's smart, he goes and watches that Memphis game and applies some type of pressure to Alabama, force them to have some turnovers and go down and hit the shots that Memphis wasn't hitting. I don't think Memphis hit a three-pointer until the second half. They were over 12 until the second half. I don't think Arkansas State's going to be over 12 when they shoot threes. I do think that this game could go one way or the other, as far as, well, maybe not one way or the other. Early on, it could go one way or the other, where Arkansas State is either going to shoot themselves out of the game or keep themselves into the game, because I think it's going to come down to 3-point shooting for them. So if you're Alabama, you have to be sound defensively. You have to know your keys. You have, like Charles said, I'm getting names mixed up. Like Joey said, you have to know your defensive keys. You have to know your assignments. And for guys that haven't really played together against other teams, such as Latrell Wrightsell, Grant Nelson, and, well, I guess those two did play together. They were on the team last year, but the team as a cohesive unit, not playing together, it could be a sticky situation early on. So
I want to see too. We've shot pretty well in these exhibitions. I think this consensus is this is a team that will be pretty good on the offensive side. Should shoot the ball pretty well. As successful as last year's team, obviously, we'll see. But the question when people are talking about Alabama as being the number one team, and I think it's talking more of that elite competition that we'll see later on in non-conference play, and then when we get into conference play, what happens for Alabama when they have an off night shooting the ball from three? Well, as we know, it's not just about shooting the three, it's about getting to the rim and it's about getting to the free throw line. And I don't think it's really being talked enough with this team that you have more guys that can get to the rim, and you have somebody in Cliff that if you really needed to post somebody up on the block, he's a guy that can do that and go score. I mean, he's a guy who averaged 10 points a game at Rutgers in what was a pretty slow tempo team. So not as many possessions, not as many times to touch the ball on the low block. And of course, there will be a lot of opportunities where he can eat up offensive rebounds and get easy putbacks as well. I feel like that's one thing that's not being talked about enough about our team this year is, yes, we do shoot a lot of 3-pointers, but I think we've also got a better ability this year than last year to create off the dribble, to get to the rim and be physical, finishing at the rim, whether it's, like I said, finishing at the rim or getting to the free throw line and having an opportunity to score there on nights that we're not hitting our threes from the outside.
So talking about a little bit about the exhibition games, what did you guys see from those games that you liked? What did you see from those games that you didn't like? I think from the Memphis game, for me, something I didn't like was similar to what Charles said previously. The officiating was just like you, and I understand the rationale, but when you're calling touch fouls when like teams already have 50 free throws a piece,
and players can't foul out. So
yeah,
what's the point?
like I get it. Early in the first half, you do the foul game, but 10 minutes to go in that game, stop calling the touch fouls that you kept calling and dragging out the game. It made a game that was exciting to watch really get to the point where I'm like, I want this game to be over with. So what did you guys see? What did you guys like? What you didn't like?
Yeah, that game really dragged by the end. I kept looking at my watch like, come on. I love basketball, but this is too much. One thing I didn't like about the Memphis game was, which ended up being fortunate for Alabama, was I would have liked to have seen Alabama play in Memphis that was able to hit the three and see how they overcame that. For the night, they were 1 for 14, which means if they had hit 3 more shots from beyond the arc, the score would be 97-96. They could have won that game. So I would have liked to have seen a game. I wish Bama had been tested like that a little bit earlier on. And obviously, that's not Bama's fault. That's not Memphis's fault. They had an off night from beyond the arc. But I that would have been an interesting dynamic to see, but that's obviously out of either team's control. To go back to a player that you mentioned at the very beginning, Christian, was LeBaron Filan. I thought he looked really, really good in both exhibitions. 13 points against Wake Forest. I think he had 17 against Memphis. Overall, I think we were very effective pretty much all over the floor. We had a lot of putbacks. We were able to get a lot of, rebounds. Last year, we were able to rebound effectively, but most of those seem to be coming on the defensive end of the floor. I really liked what I've seen on the offensive end this year. It's more balanced, and that's thanks to Cliff. And we also have to remember, this is also with just Cliff as being the tall guy, that you don't have Grant out there, who's a pretty effective rebounder, and him being able to be on, either under the basket or be able to shoot effectively from the perimeter. When you add that piece back into the lineup, it's going to make it even more effective than we've already seen these past couple of games. So those are just my quick takeaways. I'm going to give Sears a shout out just because I know that he's, 20 points from him is just normal now, but we still should recognize just what a freak that guy is, that 20 points is just expected at this point.
You hit on something I was going to talk about in the Memphis game of just getting out rebounded. You do have the caveat of Sherelle and Grant being out. So maybe you have some guys in there that are a little bit fresher, that you can go a little bit bigger and do a better job rebounding. But obviously, I thought last year defensively, we were a pretty good first shot defense, but we gave up too many offensive rebounds and gave up easy putbacks off that. Being able to secure the possession, because we're not a team that really forces other teams into a lot of turnovers, whether it's live ball turnovers through steals or just make them throw the ball out of bounds, shuffle their feet, anything like that. You have to be a one-shot defense, secure the rebound, and get out and go. And of course, that obviously helps us in our transition game and keeping the game moving when you're not having to grab the ball out of the net, get on the baseline, and then get it going again. Coach Oates talked about it. Our transition defense, we gave up 35, 36 points, fast break points to Memphis. It's nearly half of their points. Got to get back on D, got to stop the ball. We also scored 25 points in the fast break. A lot of that was just how the game was played. But I think, working on getting back and getting set up is something that was a little frustrating. I did already mention that while it was frustrating to watch the officiating, I just like the fact that that's something on film, and that's something that you have to be aware of knowing how to play defense when the game is going to be officiated that tightly. Going to the Wake Forest game, I thought it was really cool for Davin Cosby to get his ring in front of everybody. That was nice of Coach Oates to do that. And then, of course, he goes out and goes 4 of 9 from the three-point line. Great for him. But that's one of those things, with matchups and stuff like that. Like, that's a guy that can hit threes. We saw him do it for us last year. Don't give him space and don't hit those shots. And that may be nitpicky, of course, because we ended up winning the game by, 19 points or 21 points, whatever it was. But in both those games, giving up 77 to Wake Forest, giving up 88 to Memphis, I definitely want to see those numbers come down. Not only the total numbers, I mean, with how we play, points per possession is really how we would define our defensive success. Would still like to see those point per possession numbers come down. And one of the things that was really interesting to me on the stat line, and y'all clean this up if I don't have it correct, but I think Darian Reed was 1 of 2 with only 5 points. I think he got fouled on a three-pointer early on and made all 3 free throws. So he's a 5-star recruit, great player. We know he can score. But I thought this was one of the things that was really good about Brandon Miller when he was at Alabama, is he let the game come to him to find his shots. And Darian's not going to be counted on to score because we got guys like Sears and Wrightsell and Nelson and other guys like that can go, get buckets for us. That's not to say he can't do it, but you've got more of a supporting cast where you're not going to be relied on to do that. But just to sit back and your first college game, that you're not out there forcing it. And even the game against Memphis, I think he finished 2 of 7 from the field, that you're just not seeing crazy shot numbers of, this is what I'm used to. I'm used to being the guy, and I need to be the guy for this team. He's playing within the system. Like, we know he's going to have his moments, but I thought that was really interesting to me, that a guy like him was able to just let the game come to him, even if it didn't come to him, that it went to guys like Mark, or it went to Aiden Holloway, or it went to LeBaron, or it went to Diabate in the game against Wake Forest. Like, there wasn't this selfishness of, I just got to get up shots and try to get mine, especially in that first game in an exhibition game as well.
Especially, and don't forget, he had 3 blocks and 2 steals between those 2 games. So you love to see that from a guy like him, that it is not all about offense. He is putting in the effort on the opposite end of the floor so that he can try to get opportunities or give others. So just didn't want to skip over his time on the defensive end of the floor as well.
Well, and when you think about it, LeBaron, Darian, obviously Cliff, he was brought in from the defensive side, but those 3 guys being newcomers and are really leading the defensive effort. And I got to know that Mark Sears was really working on his defense, and some of these other guys that were coming back as well. We know Latrell Wrightsell was a pretty good defensive player for us too. But if your defensive efforts are being led by those guys and can be an asset on the defensive side, it's just going to help the team, of course, as a whole, and give us that opportunity to have the defensive unit or the defensive team that we want this year back to what it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I'll just caution people that are listening to this and having the expectation that Darian Reed's going to have the same type of offensive output that Brandon Miller did a couple of years ago. Darian Reed's being projected currently as a late first round, top high 20s pick in the NBA draft, but his game and Brandon Miller's game are completely different. his offense is a little bit more work in progress than what Brandon Miller's was. And so don't go out and expect him to put up 18, 19 points a game. That's just not what Darian Reed is going to bring to this team. He's a very big defensive asset for the team, and you've seen that in the first couple of games. And like I said, his shot in his offense is a work in progress. So if he does go 1 of 2 or 2 of 7 from the field, don't get down on him because he's supposed to be this big 5-star, 4th best recruit Alabama's ever gotten, and he's not shooting 18 point, or he's not getting 18 points a game, right? That's not his game. So I do want to caution people on that going into the season, that it's going to take some time. There's going to be games where he does shoot poorly. There's going to be games where he does score 15, 18 points. In high school, he only averaged 14 points a game. So it's not like he's putting up LeBaron Violent type numbers where I think LeBaron's averaged, 40 his junior year. That's not what Darian Reed's going to bring to Alabama.
So speaking of that, to get y'all's opinions, who do you think will be the guys that average double figures for us, and how many guys do you think will score double figures for us that can be counted on a consistent basis? We'll go Mark Sears and
I was gonna do the cop out of Mark Sears, and that's it.
I would say that there's a shot that both Holloway and Filan could potentially do double digits, along with, like you said, Mark Sears. I think the average is I think there will be 3 players. You could probably sub either Filan or Holloway out with, Diabate's been looking pretty good. You have players that can definitely score double digits, but those would probably be the 3 that I would lean on. Grant as well. And if Cliff is, as effective under the basket as he's looking, once he starts playing some competition, I don't know if I'd put him in double digits, but I think high single digits for him if he can, those putbacks. Just give me everything. Give me all of those.
I do think Cliff is going to end up averaging 10 to 11 points a game. I think just with putbacks, I think with lobs on the pick and roll, and we may have 3 guys between Holloway, Filan, and Reitzel that really are averaging, 7, 8, 9 points a game. But each one of them,
I forgot Reitzel. That's how deep we are.
Well, and Youngblood.
And Youngblood. And we've barely mentioned Jaron Stevenson in that as well. So we might have a lot of guys that actually average 7, 8, 9 points a game. They don't get to double figures, but all those guys are capable of going for 20 points in a night. So you may have some 20-point games. You may have some 2, 3, 4-point games. But I think where we had a lot of weapons last year, it does feel like we've got a lot more weapons this year. And that they are weapons that are not just outside threats, but they can get to the rim as well, which also gives them the opportunity to get to the free throw line for some easy baskets, for some easy points, excuse me.
See, I know it sounds crazy, but I don't think if Mark averages more points than what he did last year, then we're winning the national championship. It's just happening. Yeah. Because didn't he average 21 points a game last season or something like that?
I can look that up. Give me just a second.
I'm kind of sitting around that 17 to 18 points a game for Mark this season. But for the most part last year, I think almost every single game he put up 20 points. And again, we talk about this at nauseum and spaces and things where you look at the box score at the end of the night and all of a sudden Mark has 22, 23 points, and it just doesn't seem like he's scoring that much. So put me down for Mark Sears. I think that one's the easy one. Put me down for Grant Nelson. I think he's going to score more. He's going to score more effectively than he did last season. And I think he averaged 12 or 13 points last season. And then I think Reitzel, if healthy, can get there. I think he can be around that 11 point per game. And then I think Chris Youngblood also gets there. I think those are the 4 that I would have as consistent double-digit scorers. I think Cliff could get there, but I'm around that 9 point a game for Cliff. And then on a night in basis, I think Aiden Holloway could put up 20. I think LeBaron Filan could put up 20. I think Stevenson, if he can figure out his shot, which was not the best versus Memphis at times. I think those 3 or 4 guys can put up 20 a night, but I just don't see them consistently on a night in, night out basis getting 20 points or getting double digit points.
By the way, you're right. Mark Sears averaged 21.5 points per game last year.
If he averages above that, then we're winning the national championship. Like, then again, I could also eat my words, and Mark just comes out and just sets the place on fire. But it's so crazy when you watch him. I've talked about this with people in the past, in previous tenures under Anthony Grant, Avery Johnson. I always was hoping to have guys where like they shoot the ball, I know it's going in.
Yeah.
More often than not, that ball is going in, and we never had that guy. We never had the guys that we were like, oh, he shoots it, we're going in. I feel confident I can turn back around and walk the other way into the court because we know it's going in. Under Nate Oates, it seems like every single guy that is on that court, when they shoot the ball, it's going in. And it's just an exciting brand of basketball. I'm just so excited to get this rolling. When this comes out, it'll be game day. It'll be day of the game. So excited to finally get this tipped off in Coleman Coliseum. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, just like you said, as this comes out, it'll be game day. I think tickets are sold out. I'm hoping it's a great crowd. I'm hoping it is a sellout. It'd be awesome for a Monday night game at 8:00. Obviously, with all the hype that we've been talking about, you should expect that there would be a lot of people, but to actually do it first night of the year against a team that's not going to be, the Creighton or Illinois or anybody like that you could later see in Tuscaloosa. And I also want to mention before the men's game, the women are going to be playing at 5:00. Can't remember who their opponent is. Sorry, lady.
Ranked women.
Right. The ranked Alabama Crimson Tide women's team is playing at 5:00. Coach Curry has got herself a squad. Like, she has done an incredible job taking this program to where it is. They're picked to finish 5th in the SEC. For anybody that follows women's basketball, that's only behind LSU, South Carolina. Texas is obviously a new addition to the SEC. They were a #1 seed in the NCAA tournament. Oklahoma has a long history of being successful in women's basketball as well. And then you got Alabama #5. Like, as excited as we are about the men's team, you should also be excited about the women's team and what Coach Curry has built. So when you have an opportunity, get out there and support them in Coleman Coliseum too.
Yeah, they are playing New Orleans. That's who they're playing tomorrow.
I think that tips off at 5 p.m. local time.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So get out there, go watch some of the women's team play. I know that those crowds are generally pretty sparse, but being the opening night doubleheader that we have, go encourage those girls. They deserve it. Go watch them as much as you can, because it's not often. I think this is the second or third time in Alabama women's basketball that they have been ranked to start the season. So it's definitely special times inside Coleman. And you even might get to see the construction of the new practice facility. I think that's going on. So get there early before it gets dark, because now it's getting dark at 3 p.m.
That was the fun part about going to the banner hanging, is that
Joey, don't cheat. Don't cheat. Either one of y'all name what the mascot is or the nickname for New Orleans.
The Privateers?
Yes. Very good. Very good, Joey.
Don't ever quiz me on
it. They have low key one of the best logos. It's like a pirate captain. It's like blue. It's pretty cool, if I remember correctly.
As we learned on Mulligans and Milkshakes, never quiz me on anything, because it's not going to go well. Well, do we
Joey,
have
you got
any?
that quick. You were locked in. You were ready to get going tomorrow.
My brain is full of absolutely useless information. If you ask me what 12 plus 12 is, I wouldn't know. But if you ask me a college mascot that's like, or a fight song, that's about the only information I have in here.
Did I miss anything?
Do you want to tell people about what the space schedule is kind of going to be like? Those that didn't listen to the spaces.
Yeah, I think we're gonna pick a couple of non-conference games and big conference games to do pre-game spaces. Some people have asked for them to come back, and I'm not gonna commit one myself to that, and then also Charles and Joey to that as well to do a 4 spaces a week. It's and a podcast like that's a lot. So I think we're going to pick a couple of games, and that's a TBD on which games we're going to do a pregame space for. But we will have postgame spaces after every game, including, I guess, tonight when you're listening to this after the opening game. So be on the lookout for those. Those generally follow 15, 20 minutes after the game, just because I like to get people either to their cars, especially Charles, who most likely will be at every home game or almost every home game. And also it allows people that are in the arena to get there. And it allows us to collect our thoughts too and kind of get in the right mindset to do spaces. That those are going to be I think the only time we won't do a post game space or might be questionable whether or not we do post game spaces are on the really late night ones. So like the Players Invitational, I think they have some games that we're starting at like 11 p.m. Eastern. I'm probably not going to do a space at 1 p.m. 1 a.m. in the morning if I'm being completely honest.
Are we going to do spaces after I know right now we have Players Era, right? It's the 26th and 27th, and then that game on the 30th that we don't know the opponent is. Are we planning on doing spaces that week?
Yeah, generally we don't do spaces on Thanksgiving. I think what we'll do there is just do one of those like pregame spaces. I think that's going to be the schedule, kind of highlight the games that we're going to be playing, and then probably on Sunday do a recap space. That's what we've been doing for MTEs, just because I don't like to do those during Thanksgiving and through the holidays. Just I don't feel comfortable spending time away from family in order to get onto Twitter and talk about Alabama basketball, which I love to do, but
priorities, Christian priorities.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll have post game spaces after almost every game, and if we don't, then I'll let you know what games we won't, or if it's late, then probably don't expect a post game space. And then podcasts that we're going to try to have those out Monday, I think is when we normally have them out, Monday or Tuesdays, depending on my schedule, my work schedule, whether or not I can get them edited and uploaded. And you can find those on Crimson Crossover on YouTube, Crimson Crossover on Spotify, Apple, and wherever you listen to podcasts. I think they're out there. Post game spaces are generally on my Twitter account if you want to go follow that. Just know if you do follow me that I have a lot of bold takes, like expensive polos being $140. They're bold take to say that that's ridiculous, but apparently not.
Speaking of polos,
yeah, if you don't want to spend $140, which I will say this for people that are listening, the Peter Millar Yay Alabama Collective, if you want to spend $140 on a polo, spend money on that, because the money goes to the collective. And so I understand the principle. It's just a little pricey. That's my own thing. But our apparel partners, J&J Apparel, as you can see, we're all wearing J&J clothes. We got the pullover that Charles is wearing, the tied hoops that I'm wearing, and then I think those are waves, crimson waves.
Yeah, they're like little wave patterns.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Also
very comfortable, very stretchy, by the way.
Very stretchy, very breathable. Well, I will tease this. There may or may not be an Alabama basketball polo coming out pretty soon here, so be on the lookout for that. At J&J, that we have Final Four apparel. We have other Alabama basketball shirts that are coming out or that are already out. And go shop J&J is all I'll say. Also go to Field of 68. They do an After Dark podcast with Jeff Goodman, Rob Dosser. Go check that out. They again picked us to be number one in the nation this year and have a real opportunity to go win national championship according to them. So go check them out. And
they're also putting on a showcase up in South Dakota tomorrow, and McNeese State is playing in it. And I think that's probably something you can watch on YouTube. So I'm not sure the exact time of that, but if you're wanting to get a early scout yourself on McNeese State, you can go watch that on their channel.
Yep.
I do have one additional question for both of y'all to wrap it up. Does Mark Chernowski score tomorrow against UNC Asheville?
I think so.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, I think it's going to be a game where we play those guys late, so I could definitely see that being a factor.
I could also see it being a game where we put the rotational guys, like we just keep putting different rotational guys, but with the health concern, not concerns, but the injuries that they have with Grant Nelson, Latrell Reitzel, Aiden Shrell, maybe Oates is a little bit more tentative with those guys if they do play. I expect them to play, but I mean, who knows? I'm not on the coaching staff. That's just my expectation. Maybe they're a little bit more tentative, and so maybe you do see the Shark come in and maybe shoot a three or something like that. But hopefully,
push us over to Mark again.
Yes,
I think it also depends on how close they can keep it. You know, last year I know they had Pember last year, but last year they were 11th in the country in free throws. Free throws made. So if they're able to, if it's a whistle heavy game and they're able to hit their free throws and keep it close, then obviously that reduces the chance of any of what we just said happening. But I don't think that's going to be the case. First game of the season, it's hard to imagine that kind of situation. But you never know.
Also, get there early. I think they're doing the jacket ceremony for the student section leader, which is Andy Hayes this year. For those of you who do not know or do not follow Andy on Twitter, he's the Crimson Chaos president, and as started a couple of years ago with Blake Bullock, there's a ceremony where the Crimson Chaos president gets a plaid jacket to wear for the season. So get there early. I believe that's before the game, where he gets donned his plaid jacket. So with that, I think we're good to wrap it up. We'll talk later, I guess, today. Today being Monday, game day. We'll talk after the game, and hope to see you guys at 5 p.m. for the women's game, and then if not, then 8 p.m. for the men's game. So roll Tide, and we'll talk again soon.